It is clear from this report that I have not committed any contempt of Parliament. It is also clear that what I have been saying about this matter from the beginning has been vindicated. That is because there is no evidence in the report that I knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament or that I failed to update Parliament in a timely manner. Nor is there, he goes on to say, any evidence in the report that I was aware that any events taking place in Number 10 or the Cabinet Office were in breach of the rules or the guidance. Like any Prime Minister, I relied upon advice from officials. There is no evidence, he says, that I was at any stage advised by anyone, whether a civil servant or a political advisor, that an event would be against the rules or the guidance before it went ahead. Interestingly, the statement is quite lengthy. I'm just going to jump ahead to the section in which he says, I note that the committee has emphasised their wish to be fair. They have made reference on no fewer than 26 occasions to a personage they bashfully describe as the second permanent secretary to the Cabinet Office. That is, of course, he says, Sue Gray. So it is surreal to discover that the committee proposes to rely on evidence culled and orchestrated by Sue Gray, who has just been appointed Chief of Staff to the leader of the Labour Party. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, who is at Number 10 for us this afternoon. A very punchy statement there from former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Most unusual, isn't it, for him to be saying that the report basically vindicates everything that he's said ahead of him giving evidence to the committee on the 20th of March.
Well, this is all quite extraordinary, really, Sam, and the role of Sue Gray is very interesting. You'll remember, of course, that after Sue Gray carried out her report into Partygate as the top official in charge of propriety and ethics. Now, she was not the person who was initially asked to carry it out. The person who was initially asked to carry it out was the Cabinet Secretary, the most senior civil servant, Simon Case, but he had to stand aside because of allegations that one of the gatherings he had attended. So she was asked to step in. It wasn't her choice to lead that inquiry. And in fact, when that inquiry report came out last year, you'll remember that Boris Johnson said he believed he had been vindicated by it, and it blamed a general culture in Downing Street for some of these failures. Of course, she's not the only person to look into it, as the Prime Minister's official spokesman has just been saying to political journalists in a meeting, in a lobby briefing just now. Other bodies, including, of course, the police, also looked into it, which is why Boris Johnson and indeed the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had a fine. But so it's interesting that Downing Street having stayed out of this, we've now got Boris Johnson saying that he is concerned. He said it's surreal to discover that they are relying on evidence provided by the Sue Gray report. Now, many of those had been particularly angry about Partygate, felt that they were disappointed that Sue Gray's report was not able to go further into some of those gatherings. And indeed, the committee of MPs who's now looking at whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament on that specific issue, the committee that's produced this report, the expectation was that they would be able to publish more pictures and more testimony that we hadn't previously seen about what went on at these gatherings. At first glance, it looks as if at least one of those pictures is new, the picture of Boris Johnson surrounded on a table with some champagne bottles. That wasn't something that we saw in the Sue Gray report. The pictures there showed small gatherings in the cabinet room, which looked quite a bit like work meetings, although Boris Johnson did get a fine over one of those gatherings. So the fact that Boris Johnson has chosen to hit out at Sue Gray, who Sky News revealed is now planning to take a job as Chief of Staff to the Labour leader, certainly sharpens this meeting, the mood ahead of this meeting that he's going to have with those MPs next week, and it looks as if he's going to come out fighting. He's, of course, taken legal advice. ahead of this, and he seems very confident from that statement that he is in the clear as to whether he misled Parliament. I think we expected that one of the more damaging aspects of this inquiry would be the pictures and the testimony that comes out, and we have not seen all of it today. There may be more to come when the inquiry does its full report after it's spoken to Boris Johnson, but that is shaping up to be quite a fiery session next week.